All right, folks, we're back again with a what you need to know to apply this time in the state of Colorado. So I'm going to run through some of the most commonly asked questions that we get, hopefully help you guys out and let you understand what you need to know to apply in the great state of Colorado. Colorado is one of my very favorite states to hunt in the West. It's a destination hunt state for a lot of people that are coming from the East Coast, the Midwest. They have a ton of elk. I think the highest number of elk ever counted in the state of Colorado was just last year, over 300,000. They've got a good mule deer herd. They've got a lot of different species that you can apply for and hunt. So we're going to cover Colorado today. I'm going to give you everything that you could possibly need to know to get your application in, hopefully draw a tag, get a chance to go hunting in Colorado this year in 2025. So with that, we're just going to jump in. The most commonly asked question I get are, what are the application dates? So those are fast approaching. That draw is going to open up on March 1st with a deadline of April 1st at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So you've got until April 1st to get your application in. Applying in the state of Colorado is relatively easy. All you got to do is log in to Colorado Parks and Wildlife's website. You have to kind of build out a profile if you've never applied before. If not, you would have had an account established for you already. You just need to put your information in. You can go through that process and apply very easily online. You can also call in to a Colorado Parks and Wildlife phone number that they've set aside to help people with their application. So plan on applying. I think applying online is the easiest option. It also ensures that you get in for the hunts that you really want to try to apply for and draw. So apply online. That's my suggestion to you. All right, the next question we get asked about is cost. And if you kind of follow along through these videos, you know that states vary in what they require for you to apply. Some states require you to front the cost of the tags that you apply for. Some states require you to buy a hunting license to then apply for hunts. Colorado is one of those states. So they do require that you buy a qualifying hunting license, which is a small game license in the state of Colorado. You do have to buy that to then apply for the various hunts that you might want to. For a non-resident, the cost of a qualifying hunting license is going to be $101.54. So you do have to pay that. That's non-refundable. You are also going to pay an $11 application fee per species that you apply for. So you are accruing a little bit of a cost there. One of the great things about Colorado is that it's an opportunity to get your kids involved in hunting pretty cheaply. So the cost of a youth hunting license in the state of Colorado is only $1.50, if you can believe it. So it's really cheap. So if you've got kids, you want to get them out in the woods, you want to start building preference points for them, I would highly suggest you take a look at Colorado because, like I said, it's $1.50. At that cost, you can't afford not to apply your kids. So think about getting your kids in, think about applying yourself. But like I said, you do have to accrue that cost of that annual small game license before you can apply. While I'm talking about youth, I often get asked, how old do you have to be to apply in the state of Colorado? So you can apply your kids for preference points if they will turn 12 in 2025. In order for them to draw a tag and to be able to actually go hunting big game, they have to be 12 years old by the time they actually go hunting. So you want to be aware of that. If you got kids though, plan on applying for them at least for preference points if they're going to turn 12 in 2025. Going along and talking about youth and applying in Colorado, everybody that applies for a hunting permit that goes hunting in the state of Colorado has to have hunter education. Now there are some caveats, but for the most part, everybody has to have hunter education to then buy a hunting license, draw a permit, and go hunting. One little weird thing about Colorado is that you actually have to carry your hunter education card with you into the field. So if you draw a tag, you plan on going hunting, make sure that you have your hunter education card with you on person, because if a game and fish officer checks you, they often will check your license. Also, they will check to see that you have your hunter education card, so be aware of that. The next common question that I get is about the draw systems. How does their system work in Colorado? Now, they have different systems for different categories of species. So I'm going to kind of divide those out. First, I'm going to talk about deer, elk, and antelope. And then I will talk about the sheep species, moose, and mountain goat. So deer, elk, antelope, those are going to be allocated on a preference point system. Now, Colorado's draw system for those species is a true preference point system, meaning that the people that apply for any given hunt with the most preference points are going to be guaranteed those permits. There's no random component of that draw. So if you look at your draw odds within your insider account, you're actually going to see the point break. You're going to see the number of points it's been taking to draw any given hunt. If you do not have at least that many points, and likely maybe one more due to point creep, there's a good likelihood that you won't draw that permit. Every year I talk to people, they call in, they send me DMs, and they say, you know, I'm really applying for this trophy elk hunt in Colorado. One of these days I'm going to draw that tag. And reality is, right now, that they have no chance to draw that tag because there is no random component of that draw. So if you don't have the number of points it's been taking to draw that tag, you will not draw. So be aware that it is a true preference point state for those species. Now, the way that you build preference points is you apply for a hunt as your first choice and you're unsuccessful in the draw. In that case, you would be given a preference point for that species. The other way that you could do it is you could use the preference point code as your first choice, and you would be given a preference point for that species in the draw. Preference points are species specific, so you can't use preference points for mule deer that you've built up for a draw elk tag, for example. So each species has preference points, and you want to try to plan accordingly, either try to draw a hunt or build up preference points, because those are going to pay off in the long run. Now I'm going to dive into moose, Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, and mountain goat. That system is different than elk, deer, and antelope. So moose, sheep, and mountain goat, those are allocated on a weighted preference point system. It gets a little confusing, so stay with me. I'm going to talk you through how this system works. So essentially for those three species, you have to build 3 preference points before you're even actually entered into the draw. And as a non-resident adult, those are going to be $100 per species per year. So you could potentially be $900 in to applying for those 3 species for 3 years before you're ever actually entered in the draw. I get questions about this every single year. After you've built your 3 preference points for those species, the system is what they call a weighted preference point system. Now that is a random draw where your odds increase year after year as you build weighted preference points. Now when you get to that 3rd year, you can apply for hunts and you are eligible to draw tags for those species. You also have the option at that point to either pay for the preference point, that $100 to build a weighted point, or you can choose not to pay for that weighted preference point and still be entered into the draw. Now you're going to want to decide. It's kind of a cost-benefit analysis at that point beyond that 3rd year. If you look at the draw odds within your insider account, you can become familiar with what your odds will look like year over year, all the way up through all the various point categories to see if you believe that it is worth buying that weighted preference point, continuing to build those up and try to increase your chances. I can tell you that for me, the odds are so poor that I actually don't buy that weighted point. Again, this is a personal decision that you'll have to make depending on cost-benefit analysis. So be aware of that. The draw is random. It is a weighted point system, so your odds do increase slightly over time, but it is expensive and your odds are still horrendous. One species that I didn't talk about is desert bighorn sheep. Now, desert bighorn sheep has its own draw system, and that system is completely random. Now, typically they only give 1 permit statewide to a non-resident for desert bighorn sheep. When you apply for that, there is no point system. It's completely random, so every applicant is on equal playing field for that permit. There is one thing to be aware of if you decide to apply for desert bighorn sheep though, and that is that you cannot apply for desert bighorn and Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep in the same year. So you'd have to decide which species that you want to apply for. Again, if you apply for desert bighorn, you wouldn't be able to build points for Rocky Mountain bighorn. It's a decision that you would have to make. Given the fact that the odds are so poor for Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, it may not hurt to maybe throw in your application for desert bighorn from time to time, especially if you've got those 3 preference points built up for Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep and you don't plan on buying the weighted point going forward. maybe every few years, throw your application in for desert bighorn. One little final note I would tell you about your points in Colorado is that if you fail to apply for 10 years, they will purge your points. So if you've built up some points and you've been sitting on the sidelines for a number of years, you might want to double check and make sure, because they will purge your points after 10 years. The other thing about Colorado when you apply that you probably ought to be aware of is that when you go in and apply for individual hunts, you actually have to input the hunt code for the hunts that you're applying for. So you're going to want to jump online. You're going to look at the Colorado Big Game brochure for 2025. You're going to cruise that, find the hunts that you plan on applying for, make sure that you have the code, and put those in with real attention, because you don't want to mess up your application. You want to make sure that you put the proper hunt code in that you apply for. The next commonly asked question that I get about points, also in regard to hunt choices, is do you burn your points if you draw a second, third, or fourth choice? In Colorado, they consider every applicant's first choice before moving to any applicant's second choice or third choice or fourth choice. So what that means is, in essence, you could draw a tag as a second choice if there's a surplus of permits after everyone's first choice is considered. So this is kind of a strategy that I've used, a lot of people have used over the years. Essentially what you can do is jump in your Go Hunt Insider account. You can jump into the standalone draw odds. You can actually filter those hunts for odds as a second choice. So in this situation, what it would allow you to do is apply for a really hard to draw hunt that you won't draw as your first choice, which means you would get a preference point, and then a hunt that could be drawn as a second choice. That would allow you to build a preference point for that species and potentially draw a tag as a second choice, giving you a chance to go hunting this fall in 2025. So you want to be aware of that. It's a strategy that you can use to your advantage. You will only lose your points if you draw your first choice. All right, another common question that I get is about group applications in Colorado. And there's typically two questions that I get. One being the size of the group, how many people can apply. Colorado is unique in that deer, elk, and antelope group applications have no parameters on how many can apply as a group. You can apply in very large groups in the state of Colorado for those species. Now, when you're talking about Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep or mountain goat, that group size is limited to a maximum of 2. Colorado will not over allocate permits to satisfy the size of your group. So if your application is drawn, you have a group of 4 and there's only 1 permit remaining, they won't over allocate and offer everyone on your group a tag. So you want to be aware of that as you're planning your hunts. You want to make sure that you're applying for tags that have a good number of permits, at least the number of permits that can satisfy the number of people on your group. The other common question I get about group applications in Colorado is, how many preference points does my application go into the draw with if I apply as a group? And Colorado is a little bit different in this regard. And what they do is they're going to take the lowest number of preference points of any single applicant on your group application, and that's the number that your whole group is going to go into the draw with. So if I apply with my friend Joe, he's got 2 points, I've got 5 points, our group application is going to go into that draw with 2 points because that's the lowest number of any single applicant on the group. So you want to be aware of that. Some states average it, they kind of help a group bump up depending on how many people have points. Colorado's not that way. You're going to go into that draw with the lowest number of any single applicant on the application. Another pretty common question that I get is about the secondary draw and then the reissued list. So after the primary draw has ended, they will conduct a secondary drawing for any permits that were remaining after the primary draw was done. That secondary draw has a deadline of June 30th at 8 p.m. They will put out a list prior to that draw deadline. You'll have a chance to look at it. There is no preference point system in the secondary draw, but there is one little thing to be aware of, and that is in that secondary draw, youth applicants are given 100% preference. So every single year, I see some pretty decent permits that are remaining that will go to that secondary draw. Almost all of those get sucked up by youth applicants, which I don't think is a bad thing by any means, but just be aware of it. It's definitely worth looking at the list to try to see if maybe it's worth applying, but be aware youth are given 100% preference in that secondary draw. After the primary draw and the secondary draw, any permits that are remaining or haven't been purchased will become available on a first come, first served basis. They will put a list out to the public. You can see those permits. The first date that those are going to go on sale is August 12th. Now every year, there's a lot of permits that either get returned or don't get claimed, and those will go on sale, like I said, after that primary draw, secondary draw, on sale starting August 12th. And typically there's some pretty good permits that are on that list. You can purchase those in person in Colorado at Colorado Parks and Wildlife, or you can buy them online. You want to check that list. Every year I see some really good permits that are available to people, so you want to make sure that you check that out if you haven't had an opportunity to either draw a tag or pick up a tag in some other state. Now that yields the question, can you return a permit in the state of Colorado? And Colorado is one of those states that allows you to do so as long as you do it 30 days prior to your hunt beginning. Now, when you do that, you have one of two options. You can choose to receive a refund for that permit, but you will not keep your points. Your preference points will be purged. Now, if you choose to keep your preference point, you would not be given one for that year's application, but you can keep those, but you will submit that cost. It's non-refundable for the permit and you wouldn't get that cost back. So you really have a choice to make there, whether you want your preference points back or whether you want the cost of the permit back. But they do allow you to return your permits in the state of Colorado as long as you do so at least 30 days in advance. That pretty well concludes the most common questions I get for Colorado. This year, I have been getting a bunch of questions about changes. So I did want to note some major changes in the state of Colorado specific to this year and also going into 2028 because they will be changing their draw system. So the big one this year, non-residents will no longer have over-the-counter archery elk hunt opportunities in the state of Colorado. If you want to hunt archery elk as a non-resident in that state, you have to apply for a hunt. They will not be available over the counter any longer. There will still be second and third rifle season OTC hunts that are available to non-residents. You can buy those online, or you can just show up in the state of Colorado and purchase those prior to your hunt at any Parks and Wildlife office or participating retailer. So be aware of that. No more over-the-counter non-resident archery elk tags. The second and third rifle over-the-counter tags will go on sale August 5th at 9 a.m. So if you want to hunt those hunts, you can do that. You can buy your permit. Like I said, you can buy them online. You can buy them at a participating retailer in the state of Colorado prior to your hunt. But they do still have some good opportunities, but be aware if you want to archery elk hunt, you got to apply for hunts and hope that you draw. I've been asked quite a bit, what about these units that were OTC archery elk units that are now draw units? How many points is it going to take? And the truth is, I can't honestly tell you. I don't really know how many permits they're actually going to allocate to those units. I do think looking at historical changes, units that were OTC that now have transitioned to draw units maybe 2 to 3 years ago, those tags were available as a second choice. But then again, with this change, I can't really tell you how many permits will be allocated. I don't know that they will be available as a second choice. I think that they will, but I don't entirely know. I would tell you that if you want to hunt one of those OTC units, maybe you've got some history with it, I would probably plan on applying as a first choice to guarantee that you drew it. If you've got some points built up that you're trying to protect, maybe use it as a second choice, but I can't guarantee that you're going to draw those because I really just don't know how many permits they're going to be. And I really don't know what the demand is going to look like on any given unit that was OTC that is now a draw. So food for thought. You got some decisions to make. A couple other things that I would touch on are season date changes. And I get asked this every single year. Is it going to be a good second season deer hunt? Is it going to be a good third season deer hunt based on the dates? Now this year the dates have rolled back some. So second rifle season is going to be October 25th through November 2nd. So you're kind of on the front end of really what I would suggest is the best part of the rut. If you don't get any weather, those could be pretty tough hunts. The third season this year is going to be November 8th through the 16th. Those are pretty good dates if you can draw a third season rifle deer tag, but they are earlier than they have been in years past. I would say if you get some weather, both of those could be good, but it's definitely a bit more of a gamble than it was in previous years where those were right in the middle of November when you think those mule deer bucks would be rutting. All right, and the last thing that I would want to talk about are the changes going into 2028. So in 2028, Colorado's draw system will completely change. And what they're going to do is go to a system similar to Utah's in that they're going to take half of the permits for any given hunt. They're going to allocate those permits to the people with the most points that apply. The other half of the permits for that hunt, they're going to randomly allocate, and they're also going to give weight to your preference points. So randomly, your odds would increase the more points that you have. So between now and then, you have some decisions to make. If you have a lot of preference points built up, your preference points going into that 2028 draw could be worth less because there's probably going to be less preference point permits available for each hunt. So they could be worth less. You might see some major point creep in some of those units. The other side of the coin is that you've really never had a chance to draw some of the best hunts in the state of Colorado. If you got some points built up, you're going to have an increased random chance to draw because maybe you've got some more points. So you've got some decisions to make. You've really got to think about it. Personally, I think a lot of people with a high number of points will probably start to purge those. They'll probably try to draw hunts in the next 3 years because their points are going to be worth less once we get to that draw change. So that's something to think about. I don't really have a gauge yet on how people are going to shake out. This is a question I've been getting a lot. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't really know, to be honest, what most people are going to do. I think that it's a tough call. You want to look at it, you want to do some real soul searching, you want to look at your hunt strategy and your schedule over the next few years and decide what you want to do with your points in Colorado. It'll probably take a year or two after that draw change is made, maybe like 2030, before I really understand people's frame of mind and what they're planning on doing. Give me a chance to look at the draw data in 5 years and I could probably have a better idea for you. But you want to be aware of it because it's definitely going to impact the weight of your points and how much they're worth once that change happens. So with that, I think that's everything that you need to know to apply in the great state of Colorado. I would definitely put Colorado on your list. I think everybody should apply there at a minimum for deer, elk, and antelope. If you want to apply for those other species, you probably want to make a cost-benefit analysis and figure out if it's worth it for you. Overall, Colorado's a great state. Everybody should get a chance to hunt Colorado. It's gorgeous country. If you guys have questions about this or any questions that I didn't answer, drop them in the comments below. I'll try to get back to you. I would love it if you would like, subscribe, share the video. It helps us do more videos like this. It helps more people get out into the woods, get a chance to go hunting, which I personally love. So with that, apply in Colorado. You've got until April 1st, and good luck in the draw.